Hey everyone, I'd like to talk about about the storyboarding process. When you make storyboards, you might find yourself faced with such questions as where should I put the camera? Where should I point it? What needs to be in frame? Where should I put everything? How should I handle lighting? And you might also have questions like, how can I make my shots more dynamic or interesting? How can I control the pacing? How can I control the mood? And the answer to all of these questions can be found in an understanding of the story. Because after all, the art of storyboarding is one in which you convert a story from a pile of abstract ideas and written text into a bunch of pictures. And in order to tell a story well, it helps to know what makes a story tick. The best way to understand how a story ticks is to understand what stories are and how they are made. Now, a story is a telling of events that center around a central character. We also know it as a protagonist. And the protagonist, well, he or she is the hero of the story. So everyone who experiences your story will experience everything through the eyes of your protagonist. Now, in order to keep things interesting, your protagonist needs a problem to solve. It could be anything. It could be to go out, get some milk from the corner store. It could be to go to a bar, find a girlfriend. It could be to fry an egg in the kitchen. And really, what the key thing of what your protagonist of the, what it is your protagonist needs is your protagonist must want something. He wants something. He needs something. Your protagonist needs motivation. He needs intent. Now afterwards, we can figure out what our protagonist will do to get what he wants, because he has an intent, he has to fulfill his intent. And by fulfilling his intent, well, by doing something to get what he wants, this is action. So the types of things that he'll do to get what he wants, this will determine his personality. You know how the saying goes, right? Action speaks louder than words, and stories are no exception. So he goes out and does something to get what he wants. So what happens next? Does everything go according to plan? Maybe he makes the problem worse. Maybe something terrible happens. Who knows? Human beings are filled with fears about the future, so thinking of things that could go wrong are really easy. Whatever happens after the protagonist takes action is the result. So, take for instance, what could go wrong when you fry an egg? I mean, you might start a fire. Who knows? You start cooking something, you get an oil fire, burst into flame. What do? You throw the water on it, and then, oh, you should never throw water on an oil fire. You get an explosion, right? It's what happens is the water goes through the oil. Like if you had like let's say a deep fat fryer, if you throw water into a deep fat fryer, what'll happen is the water will sink underneath the oil layer. It'll superheat. It'll turn into steam, and it will throw all that hot oil flying out. So it's quite a dangerous thing. That instantly becomes a story the moment you try and throw water into an oil fire, right? So that's one situation. Frying an egg, anybody can do that. It seems like a simple pedestrian thing. You just want to do it. Oh, you get a small fire, you throw water on it, boom, problem gets worse. Instant story. Take for instance, what could go wrong if you go to the corner store to get milk? Go to the corner store to get milk. Nothing can happen. Nothing can go wrong, right? You can go out. Hell, you can break your ankle on the way down the stairs. You can get into a traffic accident. You go to the corner store to get some milk. There could be a holdup at the corner store. Instant story. It's things that go wrong when you try to take action. You make the problem worse by trying to do something. Take what could go wrong when you go to a bar to find a girlfriend. All kinds of things. Could get drunk, make a fool of yourself. Becomes an instant story. Get into a fight. Instant story. It doesn't. Stories don't always have to be going out to save the world. It can be anytime you go out and try to get something done. You could make the problem worse. This leads, once you make the problem worse, this leads to new intents. To a new intent. Once something like the oil fire starts up, with the egg, oh shoot, next thing to do, put out the fire, or maybe get the burning oil off of yourself. There are things, get to the hospital. It's a new intent, a new thing that you have to do, a new problem that comes up. So it's a cycle that goes on and on and on and on until your protagonist either gets what he wants. You either get what you want, or you run out of things that you want. Like that's becomes the end of the story. And sometimes your protagonist may get what he wants. Like let's say the situation with the guy going out to get the girlfriend, the girl. Sometimes you get what you want, but it turns out to be more than you bargained for. So the guy, say goes out, gets the girl. He gets the girl, right? But it turns out she's got AIDS, or she's dying of cancer, or she's a man, or she's involved in criminal activity. So that's what I mean by getting more than you bargained for. So let's example, a simple story structure. Let's see. I'm gonna go and flip to here. Okay, so here's, let's say we take the process of writing a story. So let's say, okay, we start a new scene for our story, and we have our protagonist, right? We have the first question: what does he want? Does he want to what? Does he want to get some milk? Does he want to? What does he want to do? Does he want to put somebody in jail? What does he want? We got to give him an intent. I'm not even thinking, is it a lawyer? Is it a gunfighter? Is it a carpenter? Is it this or that? It's a person. Okay, no matter what, it's always a person. What he wants defines what he is. So, what he wants, if he wants someone dead, oh, he's an assassin, right? Or who knows? It could be just a regular person who wants someone dead. Why does he want him dead? This is the intent. This is the reason he's doing something. This is the motivation. This is the motivation for his actions. So next up, what does he do to get it? Right? So if he's going to kill a guy, oh, how is he going to do it? Is he going to use poison? Is he going to push the guy off off a train tracks? In a subway? What does he do to get it? The guy's going to get the girl. How's he going to get the girl? Is he going to seduce her at the bar? Is he going to ply her with drinks? Is he going to slip her a Mickey? Is he going to is he going to kidnap her? What does the guy do to get what he wants? This is going to define the type of character. What people do defines who they are. The serial killer is going to be the guy who uses the drugs or does the kidnapping and does that kind of thing. The guy who's really, really bad with girls, who, for all we know, he might actually just, see the girl at the bar, he might tidy, you can just imagine, right? He tidies up his hair, he straightens up his clothing, he goes out there to talk to her, and all of a sudden, you know what? He can't talk to her. He's too shy. He doesn't have anything to say. The words stick in his throat. He can't even so much as appear in front of her, Or you might have this painful situation, he appears in front of her and, we can just sit there and watch him, just all the words just drain from his mouth. He doesn't know what to do, right? It makes for a great situation. The guy who does actually know how to get the girl. Maybe the first thing he does is he sits in front of her, and he motions to the bartender, hey, bartender, I'd like, 2 drinks here for the two of us. Or maybe what happens is, he says to the girl, hey, did you go to, such and such high school? I know you from somewhere. Maybe we went to the same class together. We went to, maybe it was yoga class, or maybe it was the exercise class. He strikes up a conversation with her. He finds something to say to get her involved. Right. So these are things. What does he do to get it? So we move on, and does he get what he wants? This is the result. How does she respond? Maybe new problems come up. Maybe what happens is, he talks to her, and all of a sudden, this really big guy turns out to be her boyfriend, comes down, boom, sits down next to him and says, hey, this is my girlfriend, oh, gets into a fight or something like that. Maybe, who knows what happens? Maybe her brother's there. There could be all kinds of situations, things that could occur. Maybe it's the bartender's, daughter. Who knows? It could be all kinds of situations can occur in the result. And once you have that, you get a new intent. So, one or two things, well, a few things can happen. He might wind up, so he doesn't get what he wants. Something pops up to obstruct him. The big burly boyfriend who comes up to obstruct him, to get into a fight. Maybe he has to defeat this guy in order to get the girlfriend, right? Maybe he gives up, and it's going to change the story. You have to be able to kind of roll with it, or he winds up getting what he wants. But if he gets what he wants and it's just happily ever after, then that's the end of your story, right? So often if he gets what he wants, it winds up being more than he bargained for. He might simply, we can simply use this scene of the guy going to the bar. He gets what he wants, and he meets the girlfriend, and then all of a sudden something else happens. There's a huge gunfight that erupts in a corner of the bar, right? So the idea is that the whole thing about the girlfriend was just simply to get him into the bar. It was just a situation to get him into the bar. It was just a different way to start the story. It's an initial scene. It's really what we're looking for is we're looking for the thing called the inciting incident. The inciting incident is normally when a person, if this guy was a regular barcomer. He always goes to the bar. Every weekend he goes to the bar. This is his routine. But the thing is that something out of the ordinary comes up. Maybe he's always tried. Oh, we'll talk about this later. And maybe hang on. Yeah, I'll start the next episode.